Good evening, everyone. This is the Puyallup City Council meeting for September 23rd. It is now called to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dorr. Present. Councilmember Adler.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Whitting.
Present.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Present.
Deputy Mayor King.
Excused.
Mayor Castema.
Present. Thank you for that. Before we begin tonight's agenda, I would like to recognize actually a few participants in our audience this evening. This year's Puyallup 101 program, and this, by the way, is a civics series that we have in the city of Puyallup where people learn how their local government actually operates. And if I'm correct, they probably have about 15, 20 different classes. Am I correct?
9 different classes, and then tonight is 10.
Okay, so it makes 10. Okay. And I had the honor actually of speaking at your opening event that you had, and it's good to see everyone here. Just so that people get an idea of who you are, could you all stand, those who are in the 101 class?
All right.
Thank you. It's really amazing that these individuals take time out of their personal lives to really go under the hood and see how government actually operates. And to have those 10 different meetings where they speak to different department managers, tour different facilities here in Puyallup, I hope you gain a better understanding. And I hope you ask all the questions you possibly can and don't hold back. I don't think there was much holding back the other evening when we talked, and I think it's good that you don't do that as you, in fact, explore other departments and aspects of the city of Puyallup. So again, thank you for being here. Now, we always acknowledge youth in the audience, every one of these meetings. Do we have any school kids here today at all? Well, if you do happen to have any grandkids or children in school, please welcome them to our council meetings. We always acknowledge them. We have them stand up, introduce themselves, tell what school they're going to, and why they're here at this particular meeting, if there's anything specific. And we do that, of course, because they're the future leaders of Puyallup. We want to make them feel very welcome. So seeing that there's no youth, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but I don't see any people that are that young, so we're going to move on. Let's go ahead and move for item number 1, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. Let's move on to item number 2, consideration of minutes. We have 2 items, 2A, 2B, approval of the August 26, 2025, and approval of the September 9th, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve both?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. Now let's move on to citizen comments. We'll have the city clerk read the guidelines for citizen comments because they are very specific. But each person gets 3 minutes to come to the microphone, talk about particular city business that they may have or concepts that they would like the city to explore. I would just warn you that you receive 3 minutes, and at that 3-minute mark, I have to, at that time, cut you off. I don't mean to be rude, but I have to treat everybody exactly the same when they come to the microphone. So just realize that 3 minutes we hold to very fast. So with that, Clerk, could you please read the guidelines?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This portion of the meeting is for general citizen comments. Please reserve any public hearing testimony to that section of the agenda. The mayor will call on those who have provided their names in advance. Then the mayor will call for those citizens who wish to speak. For the record, please state your name and address or city council in which you reside. Please direct your comments to the City Council as a whole, not individual council members. All comments are limited to 3 minutes. The clerk will provide verbal notice when only 30 seconds remain. As a reminder, this portion of the meeting is council's opportunity to hear from the community and not to engage in debate. Lastly, per state law, this public comment period cannot be used to speak in support of or in opposition to a ballot measure or individual candidacy, and no such comments will be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, if you'd like to speak, feel free to fill out one of these forms, hand it to the city clerk, and on there, we usually have what district you're from, contact information. So in case you say something that requires that the city get back to you, they can easily do that. But we do ask people when they come to the microphone, state their name, what district they're in, or their address if you don't know your specific district. With that, the first person that signed up is Dave Churchman.
Good evening, Dave Churchman, District 2. I'm going to address some what I think are totally unjustified city taxes. It's the end of the month. People pay their bills. Electric bill, Comcast bill, cell phone bill, landline. And next month it will be property taxes. 3 times the our taxpayers knows what they're on, but this council stuck its finger in the public eye. Okay. And raised every sales, utility, and property tax possible to give the police chief his palace on the hill. A palace that's going to start with over $100 million. And it will not even belong to Puyallup. It's a rental. I'm going to read something now from a voter's pamphlet 30 years ago, so I presume the statute of limitations has expired on that. Here's how it goes. City government must live on a shoestring budget. City government must do more with less of your tax dollars. Those are great words. Let me say it again. City government must live on a shoestring budget. City government must do more with less of your tax dollars. That candidate was believed. That candidate was elected. That candidate was your police chief, Scott Engel. That's when he was running for Sumner City Council. How times and people have changed. Lord Acton, you probably don't know who he is, neither do I. He wrote the following. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Acton might well have been describing Puyallup City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Churchman. The next individual is Robin Ordonez.
My name is Robin Ordonez, 2607 36th Street Southeast, Puyallup. In early April, I got a letter, and so did 910 other residents of Puyallup, regarding the comprehensive plan amendment, the critical areas ordinance. I've been before this council before, and my issue is staff basically said they don't have the time to analyze each and every property that this affects. This affects almost 100% of my property. This affects my house, my garage, my gazebo, and we have a playhouse also. So everything in my property is affected by this. And because staff doesn't have time to look at properties and individually how they're affected by this, and that's what they said. They don't have the time to go up and look at each individual property. But my property on both sides of this quote-unquote stream, which has no water 95% of the time. I have a 100-foot buffer on each side of the center line of that stream. and that encumbers my entire property. So I've talked to my a good friend who's a realtor and say, well, this property is 100% in a critical area, and will that affect the sale of my property? And if a citizen were to come and look at my property, if it was for sale, how would that impact their decision if they would consider it? So another thing is that in order to do anything on this property, the city says that I would have to get a permit, and I would probably have to hire a consultant to say that whatever happens on this property or whatever
30
I'm
seconds.
proposing to do, I know, is that I can get a permit to do that. However, I would have to hire a consultant. So this is what really upsets me, is that it's a bird's eye view, and I have no other recourse because you don't have the staff to do the work, but you can do this to me. So I'm opposed.
Thank you, Robin. The next individual is Steve Aldrich.
That's good timing. I'm Steve Aldrich. I'm on UGA on South Hill. No visual aids today. I'm here to speak on the critical areas updates. The council has been getting updates from the city planners, and they're feeding you a rosy picture of how great it is. It is not. It is not. It's just a great big lie, and they're in the process of stealing property from citizens without compensation. I will talk about my property in the UGA, but the same goes for property owners inside the city. You need to ask why, and make the planners provide data. The main change in the entire update is the setbacks. Changing from 30 feet to 100 feet. It really is 100 feet each side of the bank plus 10 feet setback to your building. That's 220 feet. Why the change? If you read deep enough, it's to align with the Fish and Game's desires. Fish and Wildlife state this is what's needed for effective pollution removal, and the planners are accommodating them. Really, how polluted is Puyallup that they need 220 feet setback? That's ridiculous. A blanket 100-foot setback for everyone is not the correct approach. Take a look at the maps they publish. There are many properties that will be unbuildable and totally useless to the owner who paid taxes on it for years. The owners have plans for their property. Maybe a retirement investment or a new home, totally wiped away by planners pushing their agenda through the city council. Taking a property without compensation. There are many properties that have been designated as wetlands and identified as streams. The maps also state that many of these properties have never been officially inspected to see if they are classified correctly. That's right, some of these so-called streams are actually drainage ditches. They say you can appeal their classification if you disagree. Why? Why should a property owner have to buy a permit, hire biologists to prove them wrong? What's wrong with the well-paid planners doing their job correctly? Inspect the properties. My data has to be accurate when I apply for a permit downstairs. Why is their data allowed to be incomplete? Now let's talk about the UGAs. Planners would not give me the time of day during the comp plan updates because I'm a UGA outside city limits. Now those same planners are extending their agenda on setbacks into the UGA. The maps show it, miles into the outside of it. Not just the UGAs, but actually miles outside the UGA. You cannot have it both ways. Remove everything outside the city limits, as they have already set a precedent with the comp plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. For the audience's knowledge, understand that the previous two speakers has been speaking to an issue that is going before the Planning Commission and is yet not come before the council. Thank you. Valerie Dent, please.
I'd like to speak to the city council, and when I say y'all, it's just my Southern coming out, but this dates back to almost 20 years. And it's the traffic situation that has tripled on 21st Street, southeast. All right, District 2, 19th Avenue, southeast, 7th Avenue, southeast, 13th Street, southeast. That whole area is now 3 times worse in traffic since you had Christian Cascade Elementary move up to 21st Street and their campus up there. Between Spinning Elementary, Shaw Elementary, Northwest Christian, Cascade Christian, Callis, there's over 7,000 students that for years City Council has neglected and endangered with improper crosswalks, neglecting speed limits, and it goes on. Right now, there's a few here that have seen me dressed this way today with a speed gun, clocking these people between 8 in the morning and 9:15 in the morning. 159 cars are up and down 12th Avenue Southeast. Average speed, 32 miles an hour. Now, I may have a goofy little baseball speed gun, but it's accurate within 2 miles per hour above and below the speed limit. The last time we had a major issue up there was when gymnastics was there. Parking was a cluster. You put up, don't park here, painted yellow curbs. Gymnastics got tired of the pressure, moved on. You haven't updated those stop signs. They're just a suggestion. They're just a suggestion. No one, for the most part, stops at those stop signs on 13th and 12th, 7th and 13th. Spinning deserves 5 of those push-button
30
yellow
seconds.
crosswalks. They deserve. That corner needs one on every corner. 4 of those and 1 up on Pioneer. You need to do better traffic control. 22 years. 22 years. And I'm retired. I can keep this up all day. Thank you for your time.
Valerie, could you please leave your, I see your address, but I don't see your telephone number. Could you please leave that with staff so someone can contact you? Josh Wilden, please.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, and the citizens here in attendance this evening. So with extreme gratitude, I want to thank you for inviting Puyallup 101 to this meeting this evening. And I would be remorse if I didn't come up to the mic and lead by example for other Puyallup 101 candidates, and just bring attention to one thing. And I'm the chaplain of the Veterans of Foreign War here in Puyallup, the district commander for the Pierce County Greater Region for the Veterans of Foreign War. And this month is Suicide Prevention Month, right? And we're going into the last week of the month. And there is a toolkit that the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal VA has created for people that might be mental health providers or community resources that might come across veterans. Or if you're here tonight in the audience and you'd like to be connected to some of those resources, as a VFW liaison, I could say, I would be greatly provide that information to anybody via email or over the phone. And that is all I got. Just remember, there are people that are out there struggling as we move into these winter months. We have to remember that Puyallup is always in season, and we're here for each other, right? So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for those words, and thank you for what you do for this community. Is there anyone else wishing to speak who did not fill out one of these forms? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead. We're going to now move on to item number 3, the consent agenda. A consent agenda, by the way, is where we have a number of issues. In this case, we have got, I believe, 5 total, where it's already agreed to that we will go ahead and pass, and with one vote, we pass all of those simultaneously. Having said that, is there a member that would like to set aside one of the consent agenda items? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. So now let's move on to number 4 on the agenda, which is resolutions. This is a resolution updating the city's employment position portfolio and non-represented employee salary schedule with a permitting system business analyst position. Just so the audience knows, is that when there is a position that is added to the city of Puyallup or is one that is changed, that decision must come before the city council for a decision. And this is one of those cases where some cities may consider this somewhat minor. We believe it's a good way of maintaining good fiscal policy with the city and accountability. With that, Steve Kirkley, City Manager, please take it away on this issue.
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Steve Kirkley, your City Manager. So this evening's presentation, the purpose of it and what we're seeking from you this evening, first of all, we're here to request that a permit system business analyst position be included in the city's employment position portfolio. I just want to say right at the outset that this is not a request for a new FTE. We will, this position, if approved, would be within our existing FTE count. Also, there is not a budgetary request, so this position would be filled within our existing budgeted resources. After I'm done with my presentation and any questions you may have, what we are seeking tonight is your approval of a resolution. And also, as part of that resolution, we'll be setting the pay for this position on our pay scale. And I'll go over that a little bit during the presentation. So just as a background, refresher for all of you, the city has a position portfolio, which is a list of all our available positions. We have that to adapt to changing circumstances, needs, customer needs, community needs. That is probably, 4 or 5 pages long of various positions. When we have a need, we look to that position portfolio for the position, and then if there is a position that meets the need, then we come to you and say, this position's already been approved. However, the position is not placed on our pay scale, so then you decide if it should be placed on our pay scale, which means it's funded. So that's just kind of as a background. In this particular case, this position, while is funded within our existing budget, is not on the existing position portfolio, meaning we could not find a match for the need that this position is needed with our position portfolio. So therefore, we're adding a position into the portfolio. Again, it's not adding budget, it's not adding FTE count, it's just adding a position in our portfolio. As background, the position title is called a Permit System Business Analyst, and it would be in the Development and Permitting Services Department. I think I've already gone over this, not a new FTE. Instead, what we would do, if you approve, is we would use the budget and the FTE counts from an unfilled position, our Permit Center Supervisor position. So in essence, this position would replace that position. As I mentioned, there is no request for any additional budget. This position, if approved, will actually result in about $20,000 to $30,000 in savings, simply because the Permit Center Supervisor position that is unfilled is at pay grade 52. This position would be at pay grade 45, so it's paid a little bit less. So that's where that dollar range comes in. Just as a refresher, the Permit Center Supervisor position was created in 2019. This was back when you all made a really smart decision. Probably didn't realize how smart it was at the time, but it was investing in an electronic permit system. This was before that dreaded thing called the pandemic occurred. And we were a paper-based permit system, as many local governments were. And council invested close to $600,000, if I recall, back in 2019 to invest in CityView, which is an electronic, paperless permit system. Little did we know, about 6 months later, we would go into the pandemic and that system would be invaluable to continue to provide the essential services to our customers. So that permit center supervisor position was created to implement and coordinate the efforts of bringing CityView into our system. Times have changed, customer needs have evolved, community needs have evolved, and based on that, and the market has changed too in terms of what is needed within our development and permitting services department. And so in looking at that need, there's a few things that this position will focus on. One will be CityView, actually operating the CityView permitting system. As you can imagine, a permitting system that processes thousands of permits a year is very robust. Process a lot of permits, and with a robust electronic permitting system, changes happen, updates happen. We all know it. We get these updates on our email and stuff, and oh my gosh, here comes this update. And it changes things, and it changes customer interactions, and it also can pose challenges for our employees and our customers when they're using the system. So it's a nonstop need to maintain our system. That's one reason. Another reason is that we have found in looking at our development and permitting center operations, what I just described is often done by multiple people in the department. So you had the permit center supervisor doing a little bit of this work. You had a permit tech doing a little bit of this work. You had a planner doing a little bit of this work. You had an engineering tech person doing a little bit of this work. It's not efficient. And so in order to have those people who I just mentioned, those positions, doing their core work, which is processing permits, we want them focused on that, not on CityView. And so this position will be our primary person who will deal with CityView. They will also be a backup in our permit center. We have 3 permit techs. There is 1 position that is unfilled at this point. We do not have any current plans to fill that. And so this person will also act as a backup to our permit center and our 3 permit techs who do a fantastic job. We have a senior permit tech and then 2 regular permit techs. They're doing a fantastic job down there, super proud of the work they do. These are the folks that when our customers call in, that's who they interact with. Julie, Janisha, and Emily, just so you know. The other component of this is continuous improvement projects, which is a core value of not only the city, but of DPS, and constantly looking for ways to improve our processes. This position will also do that. And then also maintain our DPS dashboard, all our key performance indicators, and all the data that is required by the state, because the state has imposed quite a few new metrics that we have to provide, and so they will work on that. We did, as council often asks, well, do other cities do this? So we did look, and there are some other cities that have this type of position. First of all, Bend, Oregon does. Bend is one of the few cities in the Northwest that actually uses CityView. So they have 2 of these types of positions. And then Bellingham also has one, and Olympia has one. There may be others, but those were the ones that we found seem to fit what we're looking for. In terms of the pay scale, just so you know, as a comparable to Bellingham, Olympia, and Bend, our position is a little bit lower than those. All 3 of those cities are bigger than us. They have more permit volume, greater population. So our position is slightly less than all 3 of those comparable cities. And just one other thing I want to point out is that we have done, DPS department has done some recent process and timeline improvements, of which this position will certainly help keep track of and process. One is we reduced our internal review deadlines. So when a permit comes in, 4 or 5 months ago, that permit, we had 45 days, business days, to complete our first review on that. We've now reduced that down to 35 calendar days, which is a pretty significant difference. And we've also implemented a completeness check at the outset of the process. Basically what that is when the applicant, the customer, submits their permits, there's a lot of materials, depending on what the permit is, that come in with that. And so instead of us going back and forth with the applicant, our permit techs make sure that all the materials we need to do a complete review of that permit at its initial stage are complete. So that's another process improvement that the DPS department has done, and super proud of that. There's a few people here. I just want to, Katie Baker, our planning manager, Ken Cook, our development services manager, and Jason Little, engineering tech. I might be missing a few others. Talika Makari has also helped on that. So it's been a team effort all the way around and will continue to be a team effort. This new position will report directly to the department director, which will be Courtney Brunel is our new director. I've been the interim for the past 4 or 5 months. Courtney will be starting in October. She's coming to us from the city of Buckley. So that is the extent of my presentation. Open to any questions. And again, the request tonight is approval of the resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, thanks for the presentation. And I'm glad to hear that our new development services director will start here in about a week or two or something like that. It'll be great to have her on board and to provide some good leadership. Is it, in terms of this new position that you're recommending for us to consider, is there kind of a hope, or do you have a candidate or candidates already in mind, or is this kind of put it out there and we'll start interviewing the process?
It will be an open recruitment, and so it will be open to anyone who wants to apply. And we hope to get the best candidate possible.
Yeah. I also want just a comment. One of your bullet points, you mentioned that we've this first review that you've sped that up a bit from 45 business days. When you do the math of 5 days a week, it's much longer than 45 actual days. That's going to go into several months probably. But the 35 calendar days is predictable. And I remember, as not being a developer myself, but trying to understand the mindset of developers who have skin in the game, money in the game, and they're looking to try and get things developed. I remember one day we were sitting over at Giorgio's restaurant across the street, and I had a developer say to me, he says, Dean, he goes, man, we really don't like the permit fees. We really don't like all of the taxes and things and the park impact fees. We really don't like those, but we don't mind them because that's something in advance we can calculate as a fixed cost, plug it into the metrics. If it makes sense, we can move forward. He goes, what really hemorrhages us is unpredictability. You take all those factors, you get into it, and all of a sudden something comes up in the city, and now they're delayed 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, they're hemorrhaging cash, and that's where it gets really messy. So I do appreciate any effort that we can do to provide predictability as much as possible. In this first review, going from 45 business days to 35 calendar days, I think will be a good method to show good intent that we want to partner with folks who are investing in our city in a way that is protecting their interests. Because as their interest is protected, so is our town and the economic development in our town as well. So thank you for that. So Steve, with that in mind, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to recommend this resolution to approve the permitting system business analysis position as our city manager, Steve Kirkley, has recommended to us. So that would be my motion for the table.
Okay, thank you. There's been a motion before us. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we will now formally have discussion. Let me just add this, that to optimize City View is very important. A number of years ago, when I first came on the council, there were developers, very reputable developers, who said that they would not build in Puyallup if you gave them the property. Today, those developers actively have property they're developing in Puyallup. And we made a determined effort to reform our permit process, and City View was part of that. I thought the investment actually was about $700,000 that we invested at that time. It was a show of our commitment that we were going to streamline the process, not lower the standards or the quality of doing business in Puyallup, but just make it far more efficient and far more predictable. As Councilmember Johnson says, that really has more to do with whether people want to do business in your community versus whether they don't want to do. And I can tell you, I've talked to developers now that are building currently very good, high quality structures here in Puyallup. And the word that they've gotten back through to me is that they would like to develop more in the city of Puyallup. They appreciate the infrastructure that's provided. The collaboration with the city has been very good, and City View, I think, is adding to that process. So the fact that we would bring on someone that would optimize that, in my opinion, is ideal. And of course, I understand that you're going to not fill another position, save us funds, and transfer those funds to this new position that we approved this evening. Okay. With that, Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Mayor Castema. I'm really proud of the progress that we're making, and I can say with confidence I'm very much in support of this. But I'd also like to put on our radar, we're becoming very business friendly, which is wonderful. I'd also like us to be resident friendly, because this City View system, I believe, is definitely more aimed towards developers and people who have architects at their affordability. But for the average resident who wants the help to build something, it's like deer in the headlights. So, yay, yes. And can we look at making it more non-developer friendly as well for the residents who are just trying to build or change or add or fix whatever they have going on? So I just want to put that on the table. Thank you, Mayor Kastner. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and that's a very good point that I probably should have covered, Councilmember Gilliam, is that part of this position, too, is hearing what our customers are saying. And our customers certainly are developers, but our customers also are the small, small developer or mom and pop, so to speak, I guess is kind of the term you might use, that may not be able to navigate a system like a developer can. And so part of this position will do exactly that. It will be able to respond, because we do customer satisfaction surveys at different points in our permitting process, and we ask how are we doing at each one of these points. So what this position will do is be able to look at those and then address them. And often that is people who may not, I probably wouldn't be able to build something. So I understand what you're saying, and this position definitely will focus on that too. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, along that lines, if anyone here goes to our permit counter in the city of Puyallup and you don't feel like you're getting the kind of service that you would like, council members would certainly like to hear about that. We do a survey every 2 years in Puyallup where we ask people the quality level of service that they receive. And just the latest survey that we did, and by the way, we pay a third party to do this because we don't want, we want objective feedback. We don't want biased feedback. We pay somebody because we want objective information. So when they do this, they compare us to other cities with the exact same questions. And on the quality of customer service from city employees, now this is from all city employees, but I can say that I've been to the permit counter and I've experienced, actually, she didn't even know I was the mayor or I was on the council, and I'm being very honest here, and the service was pretty stellar. But that rating is 63.3% believe we have a high quality of service, and that is roughly 25.7% higher than the Northwest regional average. Northwest regional average in cities is 37.6%. Now, am I satisfied with 63.3? No, absolutely not. But we are constantly working on getting better. But you don't know where, you can't get better unless you know where you're at. So that's where we're at right now. So with that, there's a motion before us in a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, let's move on to considerations and requests. This is number 5 on the agenda. This is an interlocal agreement with Pierce County to transfer a portion of the city sanitary sewer services area to Pierce County. Ken Cook, could you please apprise us of this?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Ken Cook, Development Engineering Manager. So this evening I am discussing and looking for the authorization for the city manager to execute an interlocal agreement with Pierce County regarding the provision of sewer service to 13 parcels. The general area that we're talking about is south of 39th Avenue Southeast, which is just east of our Public Works construction yard. And it's a little bit small there, but the little red circle kind of in the area in the figure. These parcels are located within Pierce County, but are within our city sewer service area. So and currently there's a development proposal for a Pierce County plat in this area. The proposed plat includes 5 of these 13 parcels. And it makes sense topographically for sewer service to also include the other 8 parcels in the proposed area transfer. The developer of the Pierce County plat approached the city and the county regarding sewer service options. The sewer service boundaries generally match the urban growth boundaries. However, it may be more cost effective for a neighborhood, for a neighboring jurisdiction rather, to serve a given area with sewer due to topography and also distance away. And so those are the reasons here for this. It's basically just closer, and also you would need to have a lift station, to serve it with sewer. The closest city sewer connection is to, if you look to the west, it's quite a ways away, about 1,500 feet to the west, and about to the east, over in the Candlewood neighborhood, it's about 1,000 feet away to the east. And then that's where our sewer service is the closest, and then the county. Their closest sewer right now is right in the bottom right-hand corner there, be the southeast portion of one of the parcels that we're looking at moving the service area for. It's still about 600 feet or so away from the actual proposal that this is, but it makes sense to include, like I said, the other 8 parcels, because we wouldn't want to be modifying the sewer service area if an adjacent parcel also wanted to change to be closer to sewer. So with that, the parcels of interest are not currently served by sewer, and there's no immediate plans that the city has, to extend sewer service to this area. It's more feasible for the county to provide sewer service to these parcels. As I mentioned, the distance closer, and also the sewer connection can be by gravity versus a pump station. The transfer results in a long-term operational savings for our sewer utility, as really we wouldn't, if we had to have a pump station to maintain, it would be quite expensive to do that, to maintain it for only a handful of parcels. Notice was provided of the proposed change to all 13 parcels, and we didn't receive any response, to that mailer. Both the city and the county staff agree with, are in favor of the utility service area transfer. So with that, that's my brief presentation on this. So I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Excuse me, City Manager, do I hear music?
I think it's outside.
Oh, it's outside? Okay. I didn't know if someone had a radio that was playing or something like that. Councilmember Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ken, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the explanation. I'm glad that you touched on the last point. I was going to ask, does Pierce County really want this? And are they prepared to accept this if we pass it? But it sounds like there's amiable willingness to do that. Seems to me it makes sense for the potential property owners as well as to the city in terms of, practicality. And so I guess with that in mind, I would like to make a motion to accept item 5A to create an interlocal agreement with Pierce County to transfer a portion of the city's sanitary service area to Pierce County, as presented to us by our development engineering manager, Ken Cook. So that would be my motion for consideration of the council.
Thank you. There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Ken, I just have one question. This does seem like a no-brainer. Are there any potential long-term implications that could be harmful to the citizens or these individuals, the citizens of Puyallup, current ratepayers, or these individual citizens? Is there any kind of long-term negative effect that you know of?
Yeah, Mayor, really, there is not. It's more economical. Kind of makes more sense to connect there for the other residents. The potential would be there's a loss of ratepayers. That we wouldn't have the ratepayers, but for us to serve them would cost us so much more in infrastructure that it really doesn't have much of a return on investment. For that reason. So.
Okay, well, thank you. With that, there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, now let's move on to number 6, other business. And this is a presentation on proposed zoning code amendments. Katie Baker, head staff and planning, will give a presentation. Katie, let me ask you a question. Are you looking for a motion this evening, or is this purely a presentation?
This is purely a presentation. There's no action from council this evening with this item. Just looking for any input and feedback that you have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone, mayor and council members. I'm Katie Baker, the planning manager. Tonight I will be giving you an overview of the current suite of code amendments that staff is working on to comply with changes in state law and to finalize the comprehensive plan update. This follows a higher level presentation I gave you earlier this year prior to the adoption of the comp plan. Now that we are past that point, we have a little better idea of where we are headed with all these code amendments. Many of these forthcoming code amendments are being prompted by changes at the state legislative level. With the comp plan adoption occurring this past July, our goal is now to have all of these amendments that were required this year or as part of the comp plan update to be adopted by first quarter of 2026 is what we're aiming for now. Although this meeting is not officially a study session tonight, this is a more detailed presentation, and at the mayor's discretion, I would be happy to entertain questions throughout if desired, or just happy to take any questions or input at the end.
Thank you.
So with that, the intent of these updates, these code amendments that we're making, is primarily compliance with legislative changes that have been made since 2021, with most taking place in 2023. The intent of many of these changes was to increase housing options statewide and remove barriers to housing development. We find that code amendments are also necessary to implement the recently adopted comprehensive plan future land use map. And the overall intent and our approach with all of these updates is streamlining, clarifying, and modernizing of our zoning regulations, many of which have been in place for 3 to 4 decades. The first bill we have discussed many times over the past 2 years, the Middle Housing Bill, House Bill 1110. This is legislation that requires cities to allow middle housing in all single-family zones, a minimum of 2 units per lot. Again, this is an allowance. And we do also have a list of middle housing types that are allowed in various configurations. The cities are also allowed to exempt portions of lots within critical areas, such as wetlands, streams, and geologically hazardous areas. In June of this year, Council adopted an interim zoning ordinance, which created temporary regulations to meet the minimum standards of House Bill 1110, while staff works with the Planning Commission and further with City Council to adopt permanent code regulations. As part of that interim middle housing ordinance, these new middle housing regulations are prohibited in the Lahar area, primarily on the valley floor, but our old regulations do currently still apply. So we're kind of working with 2 sets of regulations right now. It is fairly challenging to apply and explain to customers, so we are very much looking forward to working on our permanent regulations, and we'll be bringing those back to council for your consideration, incorporated into our overall update of our RS, or single family zone, chapter. House Bill 1293 is one that has established, has codified that a city's design regulations may only be clear and objective and may not reduce the density, height, or bulk requirements of the underlying zone. It also emphasizes efficiencies in the design review process, encouraging administrative review, being conducted concurrently with other land use approvals, and not to include more than 1 public meeting. Along with our consultant team, we've completed an audit of our design review standards and have identified that significant changes are warranted. So our approach is to consolidate various design review standards. We currently have kind of 3 different sets of standards. We're planning to consolidate all of those into 1 chapter in our code, updating for objectivity and improved usability for applicants, as well as suggesting revisions to our current Design Review and Historic Preservation Board review and decision process.
Katie,
Yes.
I have a question. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Katie, I just, the section you were just covering, you don't need to go back there, but there was a statement that was mentioned to, or the attempt was to remove barriers from housing and to expand housing options. Is that verbiage coming from the state, or is it coming from the city, or is it a combo of both? It primarily is coming from the state, right?
It is primarily coming from the state, yes.
So I appreciate the good intention of that. So help me understand, and maybe it's a little bit two separate entities, maybe it's a separate entity, but if I recall right, you gave us a presentation, or somebody did, where we talking about, and it was mentioned tonight by several constituents, or at least inside the city limits or just outside, of this new increased potential buffers to areas. Is that buffer conversation separate from the comprehensive plan, or is that weaved together as one? Tell me a little bit about that, because it seemed like it came after the comprehensive plan, if I recall right. Give me a little bit of clarity on that.
Sure. So that is addressing changes that are necessary to our critical areas regulations. That is something that the state reviews as part of a city's comprehensive plan update. However, we do have additional time to complete that, so that's why it's on a little bit later track. But it is considered part of our overall compliance with the Growth Management Act and our comprehensive plan requirements.
I'd like to suggest a little bit, sarcastic comment here, respectfully, that if we're looking to remove barriers to housing, especially higher density areas and already established areas, neighborhoods, and cities, and to expound housing options to increase buffers around existing neighborhoods and creeks would be counterproductive to their vision, as they stated, to remove barriers to housing and to expand housing options. So I hope that council will take a look at that and find ways to minimize those impacts of buffers that the state is suggesting or recommending, to actually truly live out their motto, which is to remove barriers to housing and to increase housing options, specifically in our already dense areas. They're trying to bring all this inner city living. And much like was mentioned here tonight, I've got a lot of outreach by folks who are very concerned with this increased buffers that would actually wield much of their property currently undevelopable for increased ADUs or other housing options. And that would be counterproductive to the state's intention of what I hear. And maybe they mean well, but they don't realize that their additional buffers is actually hindering, is counterproductive. So I would even state that even in my own property, as I look at that buffer, I live along a creek, there's maybe I'm just going to use it roughly, maybe a 6-foot corridor where I might be able to develop something on the border of my fence line. So really, in a sense, rendering my whole, and I have about, just shy of an acre right in the middle of the city, which is plenty of land to develop with infrastructure like sewer and stormwater there that could be tapped into with no effect on the stream. So I hope that council takes a look at that to really truly expand housing options and remove barriers by looking at this buffer. And I would even state, and this is going to be a little bit, again, sarcastic, but hopefully possible. Not only do I not want to increase state's recommended buffers, I would like to find out if we can decrease them and actually go back the other way, especially if we can provide mitigation that says, hey, we can mitigate this impact on the stream using our storm system or other areas to prevent any impact on neighboring streams. And so I just want to take a look at that. This is something very serious. I'm hearing a lot of comments. I mean, we live in the valley. There's a lot of waterways around here, and that would render a lot of properties, a lot of homeowners with the inability to provide multiple housing options in a way that I think the state intended. So I hope we have a good, robust discussion on that would free up land, not tie up land, but also not be willy-nilly, be responsible in mitigating any potential impact to our waterways. And quite frankly, this is my ignorant and perhaps common sense. I just don't think that short of massive development, that adding an ADU here and there on a property is going to really affect the streams in our city. I just don't see it, especially if there's sewer connection. I just don't see that. So I think it's speculation and overreaction. So I hope that we look at that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Good comments. Any further comments? If not, Katie, please proceed.
Thank you. So a little more about our code approach to our design standards update. In addition to the consolidation of regulations into one chapter, we also intend to reorganize the standards by topic rather than by zone. Standards currently and will continue to apply to all commercial, mixed use, and multifamily developments, but will exclude the fairgrounds and manufacturing zones. Those standards will, they'll have specific standards in their zone chapters. So with that, I'll walk through a few key issues and challenges that we regularly encounter related to design reviews. The first is to our block frontage standards, kind of our storefront, front facade of buildings standards.
Katie, a question.
Yes.
The last slide, please. Now, are these requirements in the RCW to actually delete existing downtown design guidelines and integrate?
No, we are proposing that as a way to simplify and streamline our regulations and have them all in one place. It's very confusing for applicants when they look to our zoning code for one set of standards but have to find an outside document for others. So we're integrating those downtown standards into our design chapter.
Okay, but there's no change in the standards themselves.
There will be some modifications, and I'll highlight a handful of those for you in this presentation.
Okay, are those, and when you do, tell us whether those are an RCW or that's subjective on staff.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. So these block frontage standards are actually a good example. We have pretty strict standards for front-facing facades, particularly in our downtown, but actually in all of our commercial zones. We are planning to continue those high standards, but kind of modify that to a street classification approach. So kind of main pedestrian-oriented streets like Meridian downtown would retain this higher level storefront standard, and that's what the picture on the slide is showing. So that has kind of special transparency requirements, weather protection for pedestrians, enhanced entries, so to really engage that pedestrian experience and kind of, I think of it as putting on a nice face for our primary business district of the city. It also emphasizes retail on the ground floor rather than residential uses. And so again, that would be applied in key pedestrian-oriented areas. Then we would have mixed frontage standards, which would be kind of on secondary streets surrounding downtown or in predominantly commercial and mixed-use areas of the city. And that would allow for a mix of these storefront standards with the building kind of right up to the sidewalk, as well as some minor setbacks for enhanced landscaping. And then finally, we would have landscape standards, which would allow somewhat greater setbacks of the building, but include landscaping in front of the building with parking to the side or rear. I can pause here if there's a question.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes. Thank you,
I'm
Mr. Mayor.
sorry.
Just on this, I'd like to just touch as we go along, if you don't mind, and not to belabor it. But so these classifications, I'm fully in support. Like, for example, the storefront along Meridian, and even maybe some of the established cross streets that are very clearly walkable. Is there an opportunity? Because again, as was mentioned earlier tonight, the city just can't go through every parcel and micro spot it out. So we have to have some blanketish a little bit of a deal. But I do know I was approached by a property owner that has some property behind us here. I guess it would be to the east of us. And as I understand correctly, it would require some kind of a retail aspect to that. and there's really no walkability back here. So are there opportunities, again, for folks to, put in some kind of conditional use permits to say, listen, the intention is good, but who's going to walk back there? There's no precedence. Now, there's precedence over here where they're going to walk some of those side streets. And so I hate to disenfranchise the development of a property if it's required to have some retail, if in fact really there's no established retail in that neighborhood. In fact, most of the houses are all kind of houses. There's really nothing back there. Is there an opportunity for a case-by-case situation without getting into the micro, looking at every single parcel? And obviously the ones that are very obvious, those, they would have to comply. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Johnson. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve with this approach, where exactly like you said, Meridian and probably a block, cross streets in either direction would have that higher standard of the storefront approach. We want that retail orientation. But beyond that point, so, another block off of Meridian, kind of second, third, would allow for a bit more flexibility. So that would be that mixed designation. If a developer wanted to build a new building at the sidewalk with a retail component, they certainly could do that and kind of comply with that higher standard. But they also could have ground floor residential uses. They could have that slight landscape setback, to understanding that that's not quite that retail focus like the core is.
Yeah. So I'll just use an example to kind of prove the point. So, you take Meridian and go a block off anywhere this direction, very established businesses, restaurants, makes sense. But Safeway's right here. You go one block behind it, it's all residential houses. Let's say somebody wants to develop that. Are they now going to need to be required to put in store frontage on the back half there and these eaves and stuff on there? It would be, there should be an option to, in those areas, maybe not to be applicable. Is there a clause for that to be exempt?
So we're very early on in the process. I do want to clarify that these regulations are just kind of forming in draft form right now. We're really looking for exactly this kind of input as we develop those further to ensure that we're hitting that right mark for what council desires.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad I'm providing feedback. So I think you're right. I love the concept of the storefront. Love the mix. Let's put in some provisions for clearly areas where they have the same distance here versus down there, but the precedence is very clear there, not quite so clear here, and allow for allowances so we're not stuck in a muddle. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. All right.
Proceed.
Thank you. So next I wanted to talk for just a moment about open space standards and how that affects site planning. Currently, our open space requirements for both multifamily and commercial uses are scattered between our design standards and specific zoning regulations. Again, this is very confusing for both staff and applicants to make sure we're pulling all of the correct standards and applying them. So our proposal is to consolidate those into the design requirements, establishing clear standards for both multifamily open space, which could be shared space, rec rooms, rooftop, balconies, that sort of thing, as well as private open space, decks and balconies for individual units, as well as establishing commercial plaza standards. I wanted to talk specifically about the proposed multifamily approach. Our intent is to be a bit more flexible in how open space can be provided. So we do want to ensure that with multifamily developments, that open space is being provided for those residents. Right now, we have very prescriptive and fairly onerous standards for the size of private open space, whether that's a back deck on a ground floor unit or an upper floor balcony, in addition to fairly substantial landscaping and common open space standards. We want to simplify those and have a per unit square footage that can be applied both in that private individual open space as well as counting shared spaces that I mentioned. And you can see on the screen some examples of how that could be provided. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a big lawn or fully landscaped. It could be, a patio area with picnic tables, play area for children, that kind of thing.
Councilmember Johnson? Okay. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Katie. I just have one clarifying question. So when you reference we want to see better flexibility the ability to use the space in a different way. Can you define we?
Yes, I can. I believe when I say we, I'm typically referring to staff in hearing what we've heard from the council as we've talked through the comp plan adoption in the last few months, as well as addressing what we understand challenges from developers to be. As planners, we're always trying to find that balance between the development community and what their barriers and struggles are, as well as what's best for our residents and our communities and what we hear from you, council. So when I say we, I do mean staff, but we're taking all of that into consideration.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, one more topic on site planning that often comes up is that for about the past 3 decades or so, possibly more, our code has required a sizable landscape buffer between commercial and residential uses. This is a 30-foot, very dense vegetated landscape buffer. This is very impactful to applicants' use and design of a site. It's a fairly suburban requirement and doesn't really address kind of current land values and the idea to have a bit more density on developed sites. Applicants often apply for a variance to reduce that buffer, which is an indicator that something is probably too challenging in the code. The image on the screen is of the Volkswagen site. About 10 or 15 years ago, they applied for a variance to reduce their required 30-foot buffer down to 20 feet. So what you see there is roughly a 20-foot buffer. And that was when they were expanding that parking area to the south. So it's just one example of many in the city where we've got that reduced buffer. Our approach with this update is to really scale back those buffering standards, rely on our code's standard perimeter landscaping requirements, which in general in a commercial zone are going to be 12 feet adjacent to residential. And also emphasize just quality building design standards in general, and also site layout standards that can address location of parking, particularly lighting, screening, utilities, and trash enclosures, those things that are kind of can be very impactful to adjacent residential uses that we want to make sure we are having at least some buffer from those.
Oh, Councilmember Kelly, I apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Mayor Castma. Kitty, I was just curious, what was the original intent with the 30-foot? Because I happen to live in this area, and I've had friends, community friends, say, hey, I don't like the noise. So I'm assuming 30 feet was to prevent sound, any roaring of engine, motors and things. So I'm just curious, is 12 feet enough to keep our residents happy and able to sleep at home when there's lots of noise going on in these commercial areas?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think it's a very good one. I think this code has been in place for, like I said, decades upon decades, so I'm speculating as to the original intent. I think it was certainly to screen lighting and the visual impacts of adjacent commercial uses. Probably sound was a part of that as well. And I think that's a very good question, and we can do a bit more research as to whether kind of that 12-foot buffer is enough to mitigate particularly the sound impacts. Thank you. Yeah.
Katie, let me add on that. There are neighborhoods that, in fact, currently rely on that 30-foot landscape buffer. And I think that that is taken into account when they purchase their homes. So I think that's going to be a very difficult issue to deal with, grapple with. I think it may be very conditional, so to speak. And so that clearly will need further discussion. Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. Katie, I don't recall the exact street, but it seems to me that we had a residential area come to us when there was an application with one of these side streets and this very issue.
I vaguely remember that. I think that might be maybe the Subaru site or the Chevrolet site, something a little bit east of Volkswagen?
But yes, it's not this one, but it was in the general area. And that was what we heard from those neighbors is their houses are right there. So I also share this concern of decreasing it from, I'm not saying 30 feet is the magic answer, but 12 sounds like a very large reduction, and I don't know that we're protecting our residents with that. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll kind of counter those concerns, although I am concerned. Again, just using this example, now maybe there's adjustable buffers depending on the nature or the design of the business. For example, there's not going to be any sleeping issues because most of these places are going to close within a certain time frame, so they're not going to be, revving and roaring their car. Retail hours are probably pretty gone in all the shops. The other thing too is that maybe with the buffer could be decreased contingent that there's not a building buttoned up against it. So if it's just parking and it's basically just in some sense an asphalt kind of overflow area, maybe the concerns for a smaller buffer, wouldn't really impact the neighbors per se, but perhaps if there was a building that's getting awfully close to that, then certainly, increased buffer might make sense. And so again, I would like to see kind of a case-by-case situation on what's the type of business, what's the impact of that neighborhood in the evenings or whatever, weekends, and then is it just overflow parking versus, having the wall of their, auto shop kind of, banging out there with the fume of kind of spray paint or whatever they're painting their auto shop. So anyway, I just hope that there's some allowances, and again, a case-by-case situation that provides the buffer without over buffering or under buffering, depending on the need situation. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate all of this feedback, and this is why we're coming to you so early. So thank you.
Okay. You have more, please.
Oh, I have more. I'm sorry.
I thought you were concluding there. No, please. We love to hear you. So go forward.
All right. Thank you. Okay, next on the site planning discussion is drive-through orientation standards. Some of you on council may remember about 10 or 11 years ago, council updated the city's drive-through standards to require that those drive-through lanes are oriented internal to a site rather than kind of right on the street frontage. It covers a lot of things like protecting kind of the street and adjacent properties from headlight glare, improving just that pedestrian accessibility from the sidewalk to a building, not having to cross over a drive-through, that kind of thing. So a couple examples of sites that have been built under these new standards. The Chick-fil-A on 39th up on the hill is one such example. And then very, very recently, the new Taco Time on East Main, which is the site plan there on the screen, shows how that drive-through, you kind of go to the back of the site and then you wrap around forward to the building. But that drive-through is completely on the back side of the building. These are not completely unusual standards. Other cities in our area do have drive-through standards like this, but they are they do take up a bit more space on the site to get that circulation right, and of course the orientation, your driver's side window has to be on that access that drive-through window. So they do pose some challenges. Our recommendation, and of course we'd like to hear feedback on if council wants to continue these standards, but would be to maintain these higher standards in certain block frontages, particularly in our regional growth centers. That would primarily be South Hill. We really don't allow drive-throughs downtown. But allowing some additional flexibility in the orientation in our more general commercial zones. So I'll pause there if there's any questions.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Trying not to drag this on. Thank you, Mayor Casma. I've driven through this drive-through because I do like Taco Time very much. I'll be honest, I'm terrified of getting in a car accident in this particular parking lot. Mm-hmm. Driving into the parking lot, not being able to see the exit driver come around, that concerns me because it's a very short distance. Yeah. So you have to go very slow and you hope that you don't get anybody behind you. And so this particular design, I'm not a huge fan of, but we got to deal with the space that we have. So that's just my 2 cents.
Councilmember Adler.
Thanks so much. Katie, obviously I was not here 10, 12 years ago, but I have obviously spent a lot of time in drive-thrus in my life in Puyallup. And I just want to say that I would be interested in reviewing the standards that were updated in 2014, and that can be something that perhaps you can just provide me edification on. And the only reason why I am particularly interested in this is because I often hear a lot of strong opinions and feelings about the Chick-fil-A drive-thru from community members and our neighbors, as well as the Starbucks at 9th Avenue and Meridian. Mm-hmm. And so I, for myself, I think it's a fascinating conversation, and that, frankly, selfishly, I would like to learn more about how we got to where we are today in 2014. But this is a fascinating discussion, and I appreciate you highlighting this.
I'd be happy to provide that background.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think I too would like to see what this new standard, looks like in comparison to the old standard, so we can kind of compare them side by side and say, hey, yeah, we really like this new standard. Gosh, we think the old standard's working well, but without having any comparison and no knowledge of it, might be very interesting to kind of see them and then maybe get a kind of a briefing on the differences and maybe weigh into it. But I'm intrigued. I haven't driven through the new Taco Time drive-through, as my colleague has mentioned. But what I do like about it, though, is that aesthetically it's kind of hidden from the road. So there is kind of a nice appeal with the storefront right up front. There is a nice curb appeal to that and very attractive rather than having cars kind of lined up parallel to the road. So I like that aspect. I'm not sure about the practicalness of it or the safety. I have no idea. I can't speak to it. But aesthetically, there's something very pleasing about having some integrated design that's toward the back or the side of the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. I'm dating myself. I was here in 2014. And I also know which council member was a strong advocate for this. But I think that Councilmember Johnson's point is exactly that. Trying to have nobody wants to look at cars in a drive-through. So it was definitely an aesthetic thing and trying to make things look a little bit better. So you are correct, Councilmember Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Katie.
All right, I'm going. Next is building materials. So these are standards that have long been a challenging issue, particularly in our downtown area. The policy direction from council has historically been to emphasize the use of high quality materials, but that has necessitated clarity and revisions to our definitions of what are and are not acceptable facade materials. In addition, the state legislature has intervened and passed a bill that prevents cities from prohibiting or requiring specific cladding materials. It essentially states that cities must allow as facade materials any materials that are permitted by the building code. So we are now being quite limited here. Our recommended approach is to require multiple materials being used on buildings based on the building size, and to also place strategic limitations on the use of specific materials. So an example of what we would do likely with that is to say that concrete block would be allowed as only a secondary material type and limit how much of the building that type of material could be used on. So that's what we see as kind of a safe way to limit building materials that may not be as appropriate for particularly our downtown buildings.
Councilmember Johnson.
Well, I'm going to talk about this. So going back to the state's intention to, remove barriers to housing and expand housing options, I can kind of see, if I'm just kind of speculating on what their intent was on this, hey, let's not require high quality materials on, a standard homeowner just wants to build a house and they can't afford brick and these fancy facades. But it would seem to me on a high density like the picture you have here that the city could have some requirements for long-term growth in our downtown corridor to still provide a standard of quality, I think standards. So I guess the question would be, and don't need to answer it now, but I'd like to explore, is there allowances within state mandates that honors the intent of what they're trying to do for the average homeowner that's trying to expand and build something for as minimal cost as possible, yet still not let that standard be dropped for folks who are providing high density housing with a profit margin and in a long term public kind of exposure in public areas of density that should be required. So I'd like to explore a little bit of a pushback to see if we don't have to just drink it. We can say we get your intent and we'll provide it this way, but maybe we're not going to go across the board with everything. I'd like to push back on that. If there's allowances, maybe there's not,
Sure.
but if there is, I certainly would entertain it.
We can explore that, absolutely.
Go ahead.
So lastly, on the design standards, I just wanted to touch on our review process. I know many of you have heard from some of your constituents about the review process for design review, particularly downtown and in the South Hill Regional Growth Centers. Most new projects in these areas are subject to review and a decision by our Design Review and Historic Preservation Board. This can be, especially for some smaller projects, a more difficult and onerous process. The state law emphasizes the desire for primarily administrative review of design standards. So our approach is to primarily focus on staff level review of compliance with our design standards, with the board having an advisory role only in specific situations. That would include requests for departures from the standards, as well as potentially reviewing or weighing in on larger projects or special requests by the director, or I would also add city council. So again, that's kind of the current approach that we're proposing to move forward with. So with that, I will move on to talking about co-living housing. This was a House bill that was passed last year in 2024. Co-living housing is required to be permitted in all zones that allow for multifamily residential uses. Co-living is similar to our existing congregate living allowance, although in our city, congregate living is specifically for seniors. This would be a similar kind of housing type that would accommodate residents of all ages. This housing type is made up of small, independently rented and lockable units. They typically have a small kitchenette and a private bathroom, but there are shared amenities in the structure as a whole, typically shared kitchen facilities and maybe a living room or a dining room if you do want to entertain. Many different people can be accommodated in co-living housing. It's a good option for people in our local workforce who want to live close to their job, but in an area that they may not otherwise be able to afford. We also see, and I should say there's many examples of these now, in Seattle and other areas of King County. So we're kind of using those as examples. You see often single seniors who want to downsize but stay in their community. People who want a private living space but need something more affordable and don't necessarily want to just rent a house with roommates. So it really meets a variety of needs and life stages. The benefits to both the residents and the community, the primary benefit is affordability. Co-living units are commonly rented for less than the cost of a typical studio apartment in the same area. They're often affordable to one-person households on fixed incomes or making as low as 50% of area median income. Residents also typically see lower utility costs due to the small unit size, with a location that's typically more kind of transit-friendly, closer to employment centers and other community amenities. So it is a good opportunity in that way. So again, the legislation requires us to allow these essentially in most of our multifamily zones, our mixed use zones, it would need to be allowed as a primary use. In our commercial zones where we allow housing as an accessory use, co-living would also be allowed as an accessory use. There are some limitations on things that we can and cannot require. The density that would be allowed for co-living units would be 4 sleeping units per dwelling unit that's allowed in that zone. And there's also parking limitations as these new legislation is also dabbling in parking standards. So no parking requirements within a half mile of the sounder station, and outside that area, it would be 1 parking space per 4 sleeping units. And are there comments on co-living?
Councilmember Whitting.
Yes, I'd just like to comment about co-living a little bit. We do have an housing affordability crisis going on in Pierce County and Puyallup specifically. And people trying to get into the housing market just don't have very many options, and they're all expensive. So co-living provides the opportunity for people to adopt maybe a situation that is not what they would desire, but what they can afford. And I think we owe it to our citizens to provide that kind of an option. And I've talked to some co-living people. There's actually a co-living project that's under consideration in our regional growth area just east of town. And there's a lot of interest in that project. And one of the benefits that you mentioned on your slide is the ability to have community. And in these days and times, a lot of the time, people get locked up in their apartments and they don't have any interaction with their community. And I think that creates a lot of problems that we end up with people interacting on social media, which is rarely a good situation there. Often we get people developing strong opinions that may not be founded in fact or reality. And having a co-living situation where you rub shoulders with people is not a bad thing. And we have so many young people. I know of a number of them in my community that are in the middle of a city, but they're isolated and cut off. And I just think this is a great opportunity to help people get into the housing market and build some wealth. It's a great opportunity to make sure our young people are not cut off from society and other people. So, this is probably not something that's going to happen overnight and on large scale, but allowing the opportunity to experiment with this and see how it works, I think, is important for us. Thank you.
Katie, a question before I go on to Councilmember Johnson. Did you say that this would allow 4 rental units per house?
Yes, they're considered sleeping units per dwelling unit that's allowed in that zone.
And how many people per dwelling unit?
I believe it would just be 1 per sleeping unit. I can confirm that with our building code official, but I believe because of the small size of these, it would be 1 person per sleeping unit.
Councilmember Johnson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The verdict's still out with me. I'm not convinced that this is going to be a great thing. I'm not opposed to looking at it, but I just, at face value, all the bells are ringing that this is nothing more than a dorm room concept. And, over in Europe, they have these hostels where people are kind of, sharing and, temporarily as you're passing through. But to live in a situation like this, I'm not quite sure how neighborhood friendly this is going to be. Maybe I'm wrong. But I want to go back to that first slide and just to kind of prove my point. Can you imagine this structure? I know it's just an example, but if we didn't have any design standards, we'd have this kind of popping up in neighborhoods. I mean, you got this mammoth, building here that's providing all of this high density living in kind of a dorm room style, man, I don't know if many neighborhoods, they might find this kind of a negative impact visually, and then just density of folks that are living in one room, kind of deals. So, I just, this is another example of having some high standards. If we're going to, if as it states, this must be allowed by the state, then we probably must, say, let's get some design standards on there to at least make it somewhat appealing. But again, I would like to look at some pushback a little bit on this. Again, the intent, is good, but willy-nilly kind of throwing this up all over the city, I just kind of see it. And again, respectfully, I could be ignorant to this and stand corrected, but it seems to me that the potential for just kind of a bunch of, in a short period of time, kind of some, high-density rental instability of changing, tenants could be really kind of chaotic to a neighborhood. So, but again, I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'd like to, here's a question, and I think that Mayor Castema might like this question. Maybe he won't. But when you look at this is allowed in certain zonings, I think you say, what can you flip to that slide that said certain zonings? Yeah. So this RM, MX, and C zones or whatever. I don't know. But kind of a blanket view. If you look at our city in District 1, District 2, District 3, is there this zoning that would probably be more apt to have acceptable zoning in that, where other areas probably would have a fewer footprint? Or is it, would you say, it's pretty well even across the board? Because I've got a hunch that maybe some of the zoning is maybe concentrated in certain areas and maybe unfair a proportion of allowances where others, across the city might be exempt because of the zoning. Any guesstimation unofficially? It's a loaded question, I understand.
It is. So we do have a map that highlights the zones where we need to allow this. Although because our zoning map is going to be updated consistent with our land use map, that'll get adjusted a little bit. But MX zones are primarily up on South Hill. RM zones are, and C zones, kind of think the Meridian Corridor, as well as, East Main, River Road, those corridors. So I would say probably, districts 1 and 3 would be the primary.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, and maybe using those examples of corridors, I may be a little less concerned, but I guess I'm just visualizing some of this plop down in the middle of a neighborhood. Are there opportunities in existing neighborhoods where this zoning might allow for that in an established neighborhood outside of a main corridor like Meridian or River Road?
Certainly we do have multifamily zoning really kind of from here east to 512. A lot of that area is zoned multifamily, even if the uses currently are primarily single family. So I would say that's probably the one example I could think of where with this allowance, these types of uses could go in what looks like a single family neighborhood currently.
Okay. Well, I think, if we must allow this, then I think before we must allow this mandate, we should probably look at sections in our city that there's currently zoned like this, and we may want to look at changing the zoning or adopting that zoning to protect those neighborhoods if in fact we feel that it would be out of the characteristics of that, just to make sure. I think we would entertain that, or at least take a look at it anyway. It'd be fun to see a map kind of where those hot spots are in the city and say, hey, gosh, we can see the intent here and there, but man, this looks like it could be a little bit chaotic and kind of problematic. So anyway, again, in concept, I'd like to think it's a cool idea. I'm just, the verdict's still out with me, so I'd like to take a closer look at that zoning and see where it might pop up in our city.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Mayor Castema. I've actually had actual experience in one of these. It was an Airbnb, granted, but the way the structure was set up is that on the lower level, there was a parking garage, so every unit had its own spot. The second story was more of a street level, entrance, and it was a business, so window front business. And then the top floor, the third floor, were all the units and the common space. And it was quite wonderful. Every bedroom was a separate, had its own entrance code. You had your own private space. There was a nice little window with a view of, what was going on. And then and it was a long hallway with all the rooms stacked on both sides. I think there was 8 units total on this building. And then in the common space, there was a couple of refrigerators, several actually, a couple of, just amenities to help provide for whoever might be there. And there was some food available in the fridge. But bottom line is, I met people from all over. We connected. We didn't have to if we didn't want to. There was plenty of seating for food, eating and doing what you needed to do. But it was quite enjoyable. I can imagine what that lifestyle would be like on a long term. Obviously, those of us who have households would have to simplify a great deal because you only have a bedroom. But it was quite wonderful. So if we did this well, it could be really wonderful. It could be attractive. It could be enough for people. But I would have to say I'm definitely not opposed to this idea at all, having actual firsthand experience in something like this. I actually was like, ooh, could I do this long term? And they're like, okay, I can't have a pet. Okay, right? So obviously it's meant for like very simplified life, but it was in my experience quite wonderful. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Katie. So does the legislation requires municipalities to for developers to be able to develop this housing, correct? So despite that, does the legislation also dictate a cap? Is there an opportunity? Does the legislation allow for municipalities to establish a cap of how many of these multifamily buildings would be able to exist?
I don't think it would allow us to do that, but that's something I would want to look into more to confirm. Yeah. So are you suggesting a cap on the number of these buildings in the city, or like a cap on the number of units in any individual project?
Well, I'm not advocating. I'm curious as to whether the legislation has any, if there's any, if it gets anywhere close to, if there, it's not, there's a but, right? So, municipalities, you must require or allow for this type of housing, but you could, or, is there a path to go down where, there is a tangible number that a municipality could look at to include within that municipality, right? So it's like for municipalities like ours that are somewhat interested in co-living, right? But we, this legislation opens up, and again, right, is the mandate for this type of housing. But does the legislation get anywhere close to or goes down the path of a total number, or is there no limit?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there is a broad statement in the legislation. I believe that we cannot regulate co-living any more strictly than we regulate the other multifamily uses in that zone. So that would lead me to say, no, we couldn't impose some kind of a cap, or it would be contrary to the legislation to impose a cap, is how I'll phrase that. But that's something I'll confirm.
I appreciate that. And again, for the record, I'm not advocating for a cap. I am someone who has believed for a very long time that the only way that we're going to be able to make a dent in our affordable housing crisis is to treat and go through the challenge, looking at it as an ecosystem in which all types of housing are fair game, so to speak, so long as there are thoughtful policies, codes, regulations, etc., that are put forth. So I also think that I'd like to see things. I'd like to see how they do before I make a full judgment. And so with that, I'll just say that, it would be great to see this type of housing come to Puyallup and be an opportunity for folks, echoing what Councilmember Whitting shared earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. I have a question regarding House Bill 1998. Does that have a property or a population threshold as to which cities it applies to and which they do not?
I do not think it does. I think it applies to all cities that have multifamily or mixed-use zones that allow 6 units or more. I don't believe it has any kind of size threshold.
Okay. Does it also exempt communities where there are HOAs? And it's kind of a trick question because multifamily zoning can exist and a HOA development can exist within that multifamily. Therefore, are HOAs exempt?
I don't believe HOAs are addressed in the legislation, but I would have to double check that.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. So I just wanted to buttress Councilmember Whitting's points, and I think I've brought this up before. I have seen this housing when I went to a National League of Cities conference, and where I saw it be really beneficial was for our veterans and seniors. It did exactly what he is stating. It brought people in, out of their units and gave them a community. And so I thought that was a really great thing. And I had the opportunity to speak with the veterans and to speak with the seniors. And they did find a lot of value in that sense of community. And the other thing I think that we need to remember is, I guess maybe Councilmember Gilliam is the youngest. They don't, what I wanted, they don't want anymore. I know so many that it's like, I don't want to do yard work. I don't want to do, life has evolved and people are looking for different things. And so I think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that we are building a future for these generations. I've heard so many people tell me that their children cannot afford to stay here. That I grew up here. Lots of people, they grew up in this community, but they can't, and they want that for their children, but they no longer can afford it. So I think it's important that we also think about the generations coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're taking a second bite, or Councilmember Johnson, I'm not sure what bite of the apple this is for you. But however, I would like to give a statement regarding this. As all of you are very aware, one of my biggest concerns that I have are unintended consequences to particular pieces of legislation. I live in a neighborhood where someone could see this in an opportunistic manner, buy a home, and then go ahead and rent out every single room within it and turn many of the single-family homes that we have now into rentals. And I see this happen throughout the valley, that homes that are single-family are taken off the market because they become rental. And if you're in a quarter mile of the Sounder, which is really, think about that. That's quite a way. It's longer than people actually think. It's quite a ways. You have no parking requirement. Now, if you have 4 rooms, I think it's naive to think that person will be the only person sleeping in that room. People don't like sleeping by themselves their entire life. There will probably be more people in there. So that will be anywhere from 4 to 8 cars that will be with that residence, and you require no parking whatsoever. So those people will now be parking on the street, or else they will, in fact, park will have to build, the city will, your taxpayers, at about $20,000 to $40,000 per parking stall. We'll have to build parking for them, and we will pay for that as taxpayers. All I say is there are unintended consequences. All of this sounds fine, but as with the usual legislation that comes out of Olympia, is there's population thresholds that do not apply to the wealthier communities in Washington State. And then also, in addition to that, they usually have HOA exemptions, again, for wealthy neighborhoods, so they don't have to adhere to the same requirements that everyone else does out there in general. This is a pattern I see time and time again. Having served in the state legislature, I know that many of the people who live in those very wealthy communities would never ever support this unless they were exempt. And we find this through many of the onerous mandates that the state puts on the city of Puyallup. Is wealthy neighborhoods, the Medinas, the neighborhoods, the Mercer Islands, the Yarrow Points are all exempt. But in Puyallup, if you don't live in an HOA, your community is ripe for unintended consequences. So my advice is tread very carefully. I understand that people are very altruistic. I get that. And I think we should appreciate that and honor that. But on the other hand, I have to protect people who have spent their whole life with their residence, and now all of a sudden their entire neighborhood turns into a number of rental after rental after rental, and that's not fair. So, Councilmember Whitting, I know you have a retort to that. Please, you have the floor.
I'd want to agree entirely. The change is hard. We're always a little bit afraid of what we don't know and don't understand. So, there's been some concerns about these popping up in neighborhoods, but this legislation limits it to residential, multifamily zones, mixed-use zones, C zones. So those zones allow multifamily things. So if would you rather have an apartment building pop up next door or a co-living? Is one better than the other? The parking issues that the mayor brought up that concern us. Where's everybody going to park? The mayor mentioned how many people are going to live in this kind of unit. Well, we've already got legislation coming down from the state that require us to allow ADUs, multifamilies, mixed use, those under absent co-living, those problems all exist. So my thinking is, if those problems already exist, we're already going to feel the unintended consequences of those. And if we can help with our affordable housing problem and build more community for our young people, those are arguments in favor of taking the risk, making the change, experimenting a little bit, and offering people an alternative that's not now available. So ownership is an option in a co-living situation. It's not in an apartment building. We can't get people to build condominiums that could be more affordable. Co-living provides an opportunity for ownership in an affordable way. So I just think it's something, will it be the panacea for all of our problems? No. Will it provide an option for some of the people that would find it very attractive, like my colleague here at the end of the bench? It doesn't have to be beneficial for everybody, but if it's a benefit to some of our community, then I think it's worth looking at. And you know, I am so concerned about affordable housing, and if we put bureaucratic restrictions on options that people want, then we're hurting our kids because they won't be able to afford to live here. And my kids don't live in Puyallup, and that makes me sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitting. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is my last bite of the apple here, but I do want to just kind of rebuff. After hearing some of my colleagues share your perspective, I want to reiterate I'm open to the concept, and I'm generally have great speculation against it, but I'm open to being convinced through some data. I think the first thing we want to see the hot spots of where the zoning is going to hit. That's going to tell us everything right there. Concentration, what neighborhoods it's going to affect. Second thing is, and Councilmember Whitting mentioned it, this housing option, co-living, congregate living, has some precedence, and precedence is typically in like a Seattle urban vibe. Is that correct? And maybe some places in Olympia, I don't know. But I would be curious, just for fun, and I think it's a relatively fair question for the council member or council to ask. They've had this kind of precedence of similar buildings. I would love to know what kind of calls for complaints to the police station have happened because of arguments and different things happening in this highly dense kind of one-room area. Has there been an increase in responses? I don't know. Maybe there's not. That's a fair question to ask because you've got tight quarters and maybe there's not. I don't want to be presumptuous, but if the data is there, pro or against. I think we should ask that question. Secondarily, Councilor Whitting mentioned ownership. Gosh, if there was some precedence, to where a person could buy something entry level, I'd be more apt to be, open to the concept of entry level purchases. I'm not sure that precedence tells us that. So I'd love to know housing units like this that are kind of a model. Is the overwhelming majority rentals? Probably 100%. Maybe there is an example of a nuance. I hope I'm wrong, but it's probably dominantly, if not primarily exclusively, rentals. So if that's the case, confirmed or denied, I'd like to know what's the true cost savings. Are they really saving some money? I hope so. From rent of, say, a one-bedroom apartment in an existing structure versus a one-bedroom congregate living. If there's not much difference in kind of pricing, the question is the developer, raising the rent to just a little under apartments and getting a higher profit when really the intent was to provide low-cost living, but because there's no standard of dictates by the state that has to be a certain percentage below that, I don't know if it's really going to be a cost savings. I'd love to find out, what are some average rents going for in those particular places to see if it's truly providing low entry-level rent, again, to affirm it. So anyway, those are some of the questions I have. Mr. Mayor, thanks for letting me do that, but I think it's an appropriate follow-up on that for staff giving directions for some things to bring back to us.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Two more quick topics. Our subdivision chapter, Title 19, is in need of updating. This chapter regulates the subdivision of land, including boundary line adjustments, short plats, major plats, and binding site plans. We are planning to update and overhaul the entire title, looking at the process and streamlining our requirements here. We're also proposing to increase our short plat threshold, consistent with allowances in state law and I believe direction that we've heard from the council in the past. Currently, short plats are the subdivision of land into 4 lots or fewer. State law does allow us now to go up to 9 lots for short plats. So this is something that we will be developing draft code around. This proposal would maintain the administrative approval of short plats, but we are looking to establish a preliminary and final platting process. So that's something we do currently for major plats. A developer comes in for their preliminary plat approval to subdivide the land, then they put in their infrastructure improvements, and then they get their final plat approval, which actually solidifies those lots and makes that subdivision. We would look to do something similar for short plats, particularly to address these larger kind of 4 to 9 lots that are likely to have a public road still and frontage improvements, so that those things get constructed by the developer and are not put on the shoulders of the future property owners to build out. And we would also consider adding in a noticing requirement for short plats that we do not have currently. Also related, it would be incorporated into that subdivision title. State law has added the requirement for a unit lot subdivision process. In addition to being in response to legislation, this is something that we've also heard consistent council direction for in the last couple of years as a way to have a process that helps facilitate home ownership opportunities in middle housing in particular. Unit lot subdivisions are a way to create individual sellable lots within a larger parent parcel for structures that may have shared walls, or multiple structures being allowed on one parent parcel, as we're seeing now with allowances for multiple ADUs. The applicable zoning standards in that situation are applied to the parent parcel as a whole, which is the outer boundary of the image on the screen, but not applied to the individual unit lots. Often components such as driveways or open space are owned in common, so that's kind of what you see in that crosshatch on the right side of the image. And each individual unit within the orange dashed line is considered a unit lot that would be able to be sold to an owner, a resident. Whereas currently, if we saw a townhouse development like that on the screen, they would only be able to be rental units because we would maintain that parent parcel as a whole. So this is something, again, we've heard from council. We've also heard a desire from the development community. We think it really meets a need across the board.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to put an emphasis on this. I 100% am behind this. I think this is a really great, we're talking about perhaps affordable barriers. You take a nice, I look for an example like this unit that they just built right across from Spark Stadium. They got that, I think it's a three home townhome. Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, they were rented. But let's say a developer did that thing. You could actually parse out and actually sell a third of that, and someone could have an entry-level homeownership without a lot of maintenance. So I love this concept. It does create stimulation for potential entry-level housing that our current condo liability issues by the state is minimizing kind of the condo concept. So this is kind of like little mini condos potential across the city. So 100% support of this. You know, there could be some unintended consequences in certain areas, but I think in concept, this I could get behind and would get behind 100% of this. So I wanted to share that openly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add very quickly that this is something that can be applied to a property retroactively. So with our existing, townhomes, duplexes, if someone is interested in pursuing this after the fact, they are more than able to do that. Okay, so last topic here is related simply to comp plan implementation, not any state legislation, but this is the update of our zoning map and zone districts. While I only have 2 slides on this, this is a massive undertaking. I can't emphasize that enough. The map on the screen is the land use map, the future land use map that council adopted along with the comp plan in July. We now need to amend our zoning map to be consistent with that land use map and make all the respective zoning changes. The primary changes to the map will include consolidating RS zones, those are currently our single family zones, and implementing the correct associated zones in newly designated moderate density residential areas, neighborhood commercial areas, and mixed use commercial areas. So the map will be kind of one component, but along with those changes are changes to the associated zone district chapters in our zoning code. These also need to be updated to reflect changes as well as council direction that we received throughout the comp plan update process. The most immediate phase of this update will include amendments to 5 zone chapters That's our single family, our commercial, our mixed use, and our manufacturing zones, as well as the fair zone. They do have their own chapter in the zoning code. And we'll be removing one chapter, the OP, professional office, as that is a zoning designation that we're no longer planning to use on the zoning map. So while that only got a bit of my attention tonight, I do want to emphasize that this is a large undertaking, and after the Planning Commission goes through this, you will start to see these zoning chapters come before you for your consideration. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have begun drafting many of these amendments, but I really do very much appreciate your input, your questions, and your comments tonight. We are still mostly at the beginning stages with most of these topics, and so this is very helpful direction as we continue our work. We know where to dig into a little more and what information to bring back to you. The immediate next steps is that the Planning Commission is holding a public hearing tomorrow night on the co-living housing ordinance, and hopefully making a recommendation on that, as well as finalizing the recommendation on the critical areas ordinance. And we are anticipating bringing both of those items back before you in October. Again, I appreciate all the feedback I heard on those two items tonight, and we'll be sure to do our best to address those. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. Councilmember Johnson, is that?
Yes, I just, if you don't, Mayor, if you don't mind, I just wanted to thank Katie for your calm and responsive, I guess, answers to some of our questions and concerns. Oftentimes, it's you're getting, as a staff member, you're kind of getting a lot of things coming your way, and to remain somewhat objective and fair and neutral is a skill set, and you really articulated that very well. So I do appreciate you letting us kind of feel that, and very professionally done, and very unbiased feeling, and it's certainly greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. At this point, we now move on to the city manager's report, and then we hear from every council member, and then we have the mayor's report. City Manager, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a few items. First of all, as you just saw with Planning Manager Baker's presentation, the next meeting on October 7th, we anticipate the co-living housing coming back to you. Planning Commission is considering that tomorrow night. So assuming they finish their work, it will be back before you in a couple weeks, and that's when you can start to make decisions on this. We appreciate the direction this evening, though that helps. Library Teen Zone, that should be wrapping up very soon here, and we hope to have a ribbon cutting for that fantastic event and space. That's a partnership between Rotary, our Library Foundation, and direction and funding the City Council has provided. So that ribbon cutting should be occurring in the next couple weeks. And lastly, I just wanted to thank all the Puyallup 101 participants for attending here tonight. They were here on Thursday night for about an hour and a half, and they came back again tonight for a little bit longer. So thank you all very much for attending. We appreciate that. That's my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll have council member reports. Let's start with Councilmember Dorr.
In the interest of time in the executive session, I will pass.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I'll echo the city manager's comments related to those of you hanging tough with us this evening as part of Puyallup 101. It is a fantastic program, and I thank you for wanting to get involved. This is where the sausage is made as it relates to public service. I've had the good fortune in my professional life working at the local, state and federal levels of government, and the local level is by far my favorite because you can have a real impact very quickly. And so I truly appreciate each of you wanting to be a part of the course and your commitment to wanting to learn more and be a positive force in our community. So thank you. And thank you very much for being so generous with your most precious commodity, which is your time. Secondly, I'll just mention we had a great WSU day at the fair this past Saturday. Although WSU did not take home the Apple Cup per usual. Although WSU won last year, we were very proud of that, but unfortunately, we're back to handing that cup over to the Huskies. We had just under 200 folks show up at the fair to watch the Apple Cup with us and to celebrate a fun game. A good showing by WSU is what I'll say. And again, just want to thank our city clerk, Dan Vessels, for all he does in support of WSU Day at the fair, in support of our College Appreciation Week related to WSU's Puyallup Extension and Research Center, and looking forward to keeping it going again next year. Go Cougs.
Thank you, Councilmember Adler. Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Mayor Kasma. I just want to, again, echo my colleagues and how wonderful it is to have Puyallup 101 here. It was fun to shake some hands and see some smiles and see some facial reactions to what was discussed. So it was really fun. I'm a people watcher, so you guys are delightful. And I'd love to hear your perspective after this. So I also wanted to do a huge shout out for the Washington State Fair's 125th birthday anniversary experience here in our beautiful city. I don't know if you know this, but the Washington State Fair, their why is we bring people together for extraordinary moments, and we stand for connections, discovery, and belonging. So if you made your way to the Washington State Fair, I hope that you had that experience. I know I did. Had a lot of fun there this year. Lots of improvements and just incredible experiences, and again, people watching. It was fun. I also wanted to do a shout out for our Puyallup Main Street Association to continue to bring business down to our community, our city, and people want to come from all over to be in Puyallup. So I'm super proud of all the great work that our farmers market, Jody director, is doing. And as a teacher, I would like to also report, maybe, I don't know, city council, whatever. It's a great start to the school year. Are you guys relieved to have your students back in school? Because as a teacher, I love having them back. It is so good to see them. So it's fun to see the routine that we all kind of fall back into, and especially after the fair. So all that to say, it's been a really fabulous couple of weeks, and I'm very proud of all that's happening in Puyallup. So thank you, Mayor Kaspa.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilliam. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in my personal capacity, as well as a council member individually as well. So I'll kind of preface it to that. I've been really taking some time to pause in my own personal life and my professional life and my relational life to kind of reassess and think, am I doing the most that I could be doing in my capacity as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as a grandfather, whatever, professional, all these things. And this has been going on for a while, but it intensified because my birthday was on September 10th. And we know that there's some things that took place on September 10th that was quite shocking. I typically don't bring up national news in a local setting, but I think it's my personal reflection. It's appropriate. When national news like President Kennedy got assassinated, our nation was shaken to the core, and we had some responses to that. When Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, our nation was certainly responding to that. And of course, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, millions of people were bothered by that. There were a few who rejoiced in that, and that's their choice to do so. But nevertheless, as I began to reflect, I thought, Dean Johnson could do better. Not that I haven't done anything good, but I think I could do better. And one of the things I think that I've tried to reflect, and many of you that know me know that I really believe in the First Amendment, which guarantees us two things: freedom of speech, freely, and freedom to express and practice our religion without any government intrusion or be silenced. And people that know me from this dais and also outside this dais know where I stand on this. But after what's been taking place and seeing what this latest martyr endured because of his expression of freedom of speech and his faith that certainly had some consequences. So I just want to reiterate that, unashamedly that I believe in God and in His Son, Jesus Christ. And there are people in our city who may not aspire to those views, and that's okay. They have a right not to. But there are people in our city that do, and I want to simply state that we have a right to express those without being told that we had to be quiet or to try and force that on anybody. My life now is I think, more reflected to be intentional but respectful, and not to mandate that on anybody, but not to be shy back from expressing those constitutional rights that all of us have been given by our forefathers to express. So anyway, that's a little bit random, but I don't think it's too random because it is a lot of people have been, I think, contemplating this, and so it would be remiss to ignore it and pretend like nothing happened. And so therefore I thought it would be appropriate to share it in my personal capacity as well as in my capacity as an individual council member, because I think it was appropriate. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I had. Oh, and by the way, Marla, hi to Marla. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Whitting.
Councilmember Johnson always stimulates thoughts in my mind, and I hadn't planned on commenting on this, but while we're on the topic, I think I just feel I need to say a few words. And here in Puyallup, you look at us as council members up here, and we have different approaches to things. We think a little differently. We have disagreements. We have agreements. That's the strength of our governing process. When we come together and bring our differences together and find common ground, that's when we're at our best. When we vilify and exhibit rabid partisanship, we're not unified. That's not what the United States of America is all about. We need to work together, and that's when we're working together, nobody can beat us. America is the greatest country in the world because we've got a great Constitution, and it allows us to disagree. And over this dais, we may have our disagreements, but I know that every person sitting at this dais has the best interests of Puyallup at heart. So if we bring our best interests together and work together and use common sense, we can find common ground. I hate it when we have a 4-3 vote. I love it when we have a 7-0 vote, because we've talked about things long enough to iron out our differences and come to a better solution than a 4-3 vote will ever be. I encourage everybody within the sound of my voice to not attribute horrible motives to people you don't agree with. I don't believe they deserve that. And in turn, they're probably attributing horrible motives to you that you don't deserve. I believe that we all have good motivations at heart. So that's my response to Councilmember Johnson. We love each other, but we disagree. Moving on to a couple of other things, we had a couple of comments this evening in public comments from Mr. Ordonez and Mr. Aldrich about the buffer zones on water hazards, water streams. Some of them fish-bearing streams. We've got a fish-bearing stream going through Mr. Ordonez's backyard. I didn't see any fish swimming across his back lawn. I fear that what's happening here is that the state has these maps of streams and water bodies, and we established these buffers, but we've had a lot of development, and times have changed, and the topography has changed, and the water streams have changed, and those maps don't reflect that. So I think as we struggle to implement these state regulations about buffering and responding to the state direction, we need to be very thoughtful about how we go about doing that and protect the rights of property owners and avoid putting restrictions on development where they don't belong. So again, we need to take a thoughtful approach to that. And I'm going to have one more bite of the apple on the co-living thing. A couple of things. Councilmember Johnson talked about how many people have fights and how often the cops are called out. The police officers. I'm sorry, I don't like to use the word cops. I think that's not very respectful to our police officers. But I think we have a lot more times where our officers are called out to domestic disturbances within single-family homes than we do in co-living situations. So are we setting a different standard for co-living than we are for single-family homes? Let's not do single-family homes because we have domestic violence. I just don't understand that kind of thinking. And I have one more thought there. And there was references that co-living is a Seattle thing. Well, I just looked up real quick on my ChatGPT, and there's 3 projects in Bellingham. There's one in Bothell. There's one in Concrete. There's one in Bremerton. There's, I think, 2 in Port Townsend. There's one in Cle Elum. There's one in Ferndale. So this isn't necessarily a Seattle thing. It's a affordable housing thing. So that is my council member report. I don't usually talk this long, but thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
And thank you, Puyallup 101s. We love you.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitting. I do want to thank you for being here on the Puyallup 101. We're actually getting out a little bit early this evening, so consider yourself fortunate. We have executive session after this, which will probably take anywhere from a half hour to an hour. So as you can see, the effort that we engage in continues. I'm not sure we met your expectations this evening. Sometimes people think we dress in robes and we speak in Latin. It's absolutely not true. But when you go home and you see your spouse or significant other, you can tell them that you heard such exciting topics as sewer service area changes, employee position planning reviews, zoning changes for drive-through restaurants, setback storefronts, design review process, building materials, and the very provocative subject of co-living, which, when you explain it, it won't be so provocative. But I want you to know this is more the norm than it is than not normal, what you're seeing here this evening. The subject matter that we deal with on the council is fairly dry at times. If you'll notice that all of my colleagues, including my colleague to my right, very engaged individuals asking questions. And on all of these types of matters, people think that sitting on city council, we're only making these very broad, big speeches, again, like a Solon or someone in a robe would make. But in fact, it's this type of nitty-gritty. And then to compound that, council members, they all have jobs. I think Councilmember Whitting and I are the only ones that are officially retired. That's it. Everyone else has to work a full-time job because this position pays more or less a stipend is what we get when we serve on this. So you have to ask yourself, why would people go through all that they go through and serve on the city council? And you'll often hear, and I'm talking when we go out, when we're not sitting on the dais, people will say that they love this community. Councilmember Johnson has his great-grandfather. He was actually on the first city council with Ezra Meeker. I can go right on down the line of people who have been here for multi-generations. I'm kind of a piker. I've only lived in the same house 65 years, which, by the way, sounds significant, but there's a lot of people in this community who have been here much longer. Their families have been here much longer than mine. So I applaud my colleagues for going through all of this, and I wasn't kidding. There are times we have been here till 11, 12 o'clock at night, and when we go into executive session, sometimes that just goes on and on. So I say, despite what I've just told you, I think it's very worthwhile to do this, and I would encourage other people to get involved, and I hope that you're inspired through the Puyallup 101 process. Let me dovetail off the comments of Councilmember Whitting, Councilmember Johnson in dealing with dialogue, especially around politics. I've long believed that it's important when we meet with each other that we adhere to, like what my grandparents used to say, don't discuss politics or religion. And they would say that, not that those subject matters didn't come up, but they would want to talk about families, children, dreams you have, travels you have, hobbies. Get to know the other individual. And spending their time knowing that complexity of that person's life, when politics inevitably rears its head and it's part of the discussion, you see that person now not as an enemy, but somebody who has a lot in common with you. And you may have a disagreement, but the vitriol that you see, the divisiveness is not there. So I would encourage all of us, maybe the Puyallup way, is that you spend a significant of your time meeting with other people, even your political adversaries. Don't talk about politics. Talk about other things. Realize you have a lot more in common than you have apart. And I think that by engaging in those conversations, this community can be very healthy now and for the long term. So again, thank you, Puyallup 101. Thank you to my colleagues. I'm very fortunate to serve with all of you. With that, we're now going to go into executive session. The council will now recess into executive session to consider the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or lease when public knowledge regarding such considerations would cause a likelihood of decreased price, and to engage in the process of planning or adopting a strategy or position to be taken during the course of any collective bargaining. The executive session is expected to last 1 hour, and no further action is expected following the executive session. So in essence, I would not, you're all free to go. I'm going to gavel the end of this meeting. It's been an honor to be with all of you. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.